Our next guest says the real surprise is in Nvidia's earnings, the durability of that growth outlook. Doug Huber is Deputy Chief Investment Officer at Wealth Enhancement Group, which across funds has about $1.9 billion worth of Nvidia's stock. What do you mean by durability? What was the evidence you saw that this goes beyond, I suppose, fiscal 28?
Yeah, I think, frankly, it really did shift the dynamic, to me at least, in that massive outlook they put forward, right? I think it shifted the thought process of, is demand slowing, and moving this to is the industry physically able to build enough compute to satisfy it, right? I think that was that shocking number that Ian was just talking about, with 70% growth next year, but that's supply constrained. I mean, it could be 100, 120, right? And so I think everybody thought this cycle was kind of nearing, and they were pretty clear that there was a lot of demand, not only through hyperscalers, but also through the ASI channels. And so I think that's really compelling.
So, Doug, let's go there. When Ian and I were on the phone with the CFO, Colette Kress, there was a heavy emphasis on the hyperscalers, still surging. They've already put their orders in for next year. If there was a set of numbers under the hood, it was the concentration of business still in the hyperscalers. What do you make of that now, and the idea that Nvidia feels that broadens beyond fiscal 28?
Yeah, I think, I think she pointed out on the call that they are, buyers of chips, essentially, where some of the other channels, it's much more of a total infrastructure, right? And I think that build out takes longer. I think the integrations take longer. And so, yes, I think we expected to see better numbers, or at least potentially a little bit better numbers from those other channels. But it does sound to me, and I think they alluded to the fact that that is coming through, that's pulling through. And you can see those as being really large channels, whether it's the sovereigns, the neo clouds, the enterprise solutions. I mean, I think that will be an interesting channel for them. The question I have, and I don't think they've really touched on it to date, is did they get the same margin out of that, given that it sounds like it's a higher lift to implement?
I find that interesting. There's a difference, I suppose, in selling Vera Rubin systems to the hyperscalers at scale and doing lots of little deals with, what are enterprises, essentially. Do you want to see Nvidia shift away its reliance from the hyperscaler? Is that something that you would demand of the company?
I don't know if I demand it of the company. They're clearly doing a pretty good job, but I do think it's interesting to see
sensible
that
point of view.
Yeah, but I think they're interestingly moving to more of that integrated AI platform, right? So whether it's the GPUs, the CPUs, the networking, the software, the inference, and how they can apply that, I think that has set them apart a little bit, and I think it protects them, especially as some of these hyperscalers are developing their own custom silicon.
Doug, I'm going to go back to the shares. Actually, they've just pulled back a touch below an 8% gain, but it's pretty astonishing, right? The change in the story. On track for its best day since April of 2025 at some point. What is it specifically that the market is cheering so much here? How unusual it is to have a full year fiscal year guide? Something more than that?
It seems to be really anchored to that guidance, right? I think if you saw when it first came out, it actually trended down right after the announcement. I think people looked at that margin number and looked at the forward guidance that the margin actually might decrease next year. But then on the call, as they really hammered this potential future growth opportunity, I think that really woke folks up to the fact that there is still a lot of demand, and we are actually trying to figure out how do we supply it all. And I think that was a real defining point in that call, that you actually saw the stock move. The price action moved kind of right around when that kind of came up.
So the argument is top line growth for that fiscal year would be greater were it not for supply constraints. So demand is doubling. It's at 100%. Do you take that at full face value?
That's a great question. I think that's what everybody's trying to figure out. I mean, I think more data points as we go through here will be interesting to see outside of just Nvidia, right? Are we seeing that CapEx continue to go up? Are we seeing the folks, the neo clouds and others, continuing to press that spend? And how are they guiding, right? And I think that will be certainly confirmatory to what they're saying. But it does appear that they are quite bullish on their calls. We know that. But I think this one felt and had evidence points, to me at least, that seemed to indicate that this is a really sustainable and quite real possibility that growth is there. Now, whether it's 70, 100, 60, who knows? And obviously the market is going to price this on what they execute on, but it certainly seems like there's a lot of tailwind, maybe more tailwind than I think anybody might have appreciated here.
Doug, in prior quarters, the question was always, is the bigger picture story intact? Like AI is full momentum, and that chart I was just showing was adoption on different metrics against the frontier labs. What Colette Kress in particular argued was like, look, we have full confidence that those frontier labs are going to go turn into mature companies, not just revenue, they're going to be great businesses. No one seems to be lingering on that this morning. Why?
It's a great question. I mean, it does come up a lot. You know, how are they using their balance sheet? I think she said they've invested $50 billion or plan to invest $50 billion in the labs. And I think it is a great breeding ground, right? If you can be intimately involved in the growth of these so-called farm teams, right, and have your product integrated early, have the system set up so it's utilizing your infrastructure from the start, if they catch traction and if they become the next big player, right, being in early is unbelievable, and it could really lead to a lot of upside for Nvidia and for their ability to push that product through. I don't know if people are just not quite discounting that yet and saying, listen, we'll evaluate that as time goes on. We're more focused on the actual numbers, but I thought that was a really interesting piece of the phone call.